class. Today we're going to be talking about pollination. Pollination is a very essential cycle in which plants reproduce. In order to have pollination occur, you need to have two things. You need to have a pollinator and you also need to have flowers. Today we're going to look at the pollination cycle. But first, before we get more into depth about that, we're going to talk about the parts of the flower. I think it's important for us to better understand the parts of the flower because it will help us understand the pollination process, and it's important for us to know what parts of the flower do what in order for it to complete the pollination cycle. So first, let's take a look at the flower. The flower is composed of many structures. We probably didn't know about most of these because we just typically look at flowers and we think they're beautiful and pretty, but we're going to look at the actual structures and the functions of each. The first thing we're going to look at is the anther. This little guy right here. That is the anther. That is in charge of making the pollen that the pollinators will use to pollinate all the other flowers around. The next thing we're going to look at is the pistil. The pistil is this huge structure right here in the middle. It's composed up of 5 different structures inside of it. The first structure is the stigma. That little guy right at the opening. He is in charge of grabbing the pollen and bringing them back into the style, the next part. The style, which is this guy right here, this long tube, it is what takes all the pollen into the flower, into the ovule, and into the ovaries. The ovaries are right here in this big circle. And within that circle, it has the eggs right here. The ovule, also known as the eggs, is what helps to add with the pollen and make new seeds for new flowers. And that is the different parts of the flower that we will be looking at today. The next part that we are going to look at is the pollinators themselves. Let's get there. The next thing we're going to look at is the pollinators. Pollinators are any types of things that take pollen from one flower and bring it to the next. A lot of the times we see bees and butterflies as being the most common ways of pollinating other flowers. The bees will grab the pollen from the pollen that they're eating off of on the flowers and will bring it to nearby flowers when they go to eat more. Same with the butterflies. There are also other different types of pollinators like the wind or even animals. Like if you ever see those sticky little sharp pokey thorn little ball things, yeah, those that get stuck on our clothes when we're in the woods or something, those will grab onto our clothes or on animals and will bring them to new places and it will plant new plants there. Pollinators are a big part of the cycle because without them, we wouldn't really have flowers. Another pollinator would be the wind. The wind can pick up pollen from flowers and will bring it to other nearby flowers. Now let's look at the pollination cycle itself. Here's the pollination cycle. We can see that there's 2 different flowers and a pollinator. So what will happen is the pollinator will come to the first flower and it will sit there and eat the nectar. The nectar is sweet, so that's the food source for the bee or for the butterfly. It will sit there and feast, and the pollen will collect up on its legs on these little hair-like structures, and when the bee is done at that flower, it will go to the next flower, and it will start drinking the nectar from there. When they do that, the pollen falls off of their legs and goes into the stigma. It will then travel down the style and will go into the ovaries, into the ovule, which are the eggs. That is what causes them to pollinate. When the pollen reaches the eggs, they will pollinate, and then it will create more seeds that will be used for new flowers. So now that we have seen the pollination cycle and we better understand the different types of the flower and the structures within it, let's now look at the activity we're going to do. Today I want you to draw and label the pollination cycle. Please make sure to label the stamen, anther, stigma, ovary, pollen, and pollinator. So as you can see here, I've drawn out the cycle. I've also added color. You don't have to if you don't want to. Get creative if you want. I've shown the two flowers, and I've also shown the bees coming down onto the flower and coming up and flying over to the next flower. I've also labeled each structure so that you can see the different structures within the flowers and even the pollen and the pollinator. Just remember, get creative. You don't have to color it. Just draw and label the pollination cycle. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.